The rebellion has been losing ground steadily for the last several days, almost a week. They lost Benjawad, they lost Ras Lanouf, they lost Brega. Ashdabia is now being fought for. If the town of Ashdabia is lost in the next couple of days, then there is very little, in fact almost nothing, stopping pro-Gaddafi security forces from moving right on to Benghazi. It's just a 2-hour drive of mostly desert from Ashdabia to Benghazi, and it is entirely imaginable that pro-Gaddafi forces could get to Benghazi quickly. The next 48 hours, that's anyone's guess. So far, the pro-Gaddafi forces have been actually they've been gaining ground steadily, but they haven't been in a rush. They've been taking their time, they've been deploying artillery, getting their men inside towns to also take the rebels by surprise. In all likelihood, they're going to do the same thing after Ashdabia, heading for Benghazi. What we did see was a change in the rebels' attitude. The first few days, in those heady days when the rebels were taking town after town after town, and they were just gaining ground, there was a feeling that nothing could stop them, that they were going to take the Gaddafi bastion of Sirte and that they would then move on to the capital, and they seemed to sincerely believe that. When their advance was stopped and the pro-Gaddafi forces started gaining back some ground, it became clear that the rebels did not have the military hierarchy, the military organization, and the military know-how to really fight against Gaddafi's army. And after a few days of that, when rebels kept losing ground, the attitude changed, and some people started telling us, we can't win this if we don't have outside support. It's actually unclear what the risks are for journalists in Benghazi. What we know is that a journalist from an international news network was shot. This was on Saturday evening, and he was ambushed and he was shot because he was a journalist. He was targeted on account of being a journalist. So clearly that risk exists, but it's difficult to quantify. What we know is that there are pro-Gaddafi men, pro-regime Libyans in every town. And while the rebels were making advances, they were keeping a low profile. As the rebels lose ground, I think they're going to become more and more numerous, and Gaddafi is going to be able to call on them to carry out any number of actions, including what we saw last weekend, one journalist being shot. It made the situation, in the short term, it didn't change anything for French journalists because French journalists, like other international journalists, were surrounded only by rebels. In fact, it made it easier for French journalists because rebels, suddenly the French were their favorite nationality. Once the situation changes, if it does change, and journalists are working in an environment that is also infiltrated or dominated by pro-Gaddafi forces, then they may become more of a target than international journalists. But let's not forget, Gaddafi has said journalists in general, not just those who are French, have to be treated like rebels. They are Al-Qaeda operatives who are coming from outside to throw down his regime. So the threat is really concerning all journalists.